We're the Wild Center, this is Lunchtime Live. We're talking about nature and exciting wildlife. Encounters with otters and owls too, from Tupper Lake right to you. Learn about the plants and trees, there's so much to explore and see. Lunchtime Live, it's time to start the show. From the Wild Center, here we go.
Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Live presents Worst Gardener Ever. My name is Nick. I am the titular worst gardener ever, and that's not an exaggeration. I've never met a plant or flower that I wasn't able to kill within a week's time. Anyways, over the next weeks and months, I'm going to be talking to some of my Wild Center co-workers and getting advice from viewers like you on trying to become a certified green thumb. So I've been doing a lot of research and talking to a lot of folks that consider themselves master gardeners about what I need to do in order to become a certified green thumb. So like I said, I've been doing a lot of talking, doing a lot of research, and doing a lot of practice. Let's cue the 80s training montage. So as you can see, I've been doing a lot of training getting ready for this spring and planting season. Anyways, if you're familiar with the Adirondacks or live in northern New York, you know that at the beginning of spring, it's very difficult to get seeds started outside. It gets so cold at night that there's a lot of frost, which means today we are in my kitchen and we're going to start some seeds today. Of course, we need to do it in a controlled environment in order to get those seeds started. So first, there's a couple different methods for seed starting that people have suggested. One are in soil and small pots like this, so we'll do some of those today. The others are in the paper towel method. Now, I was able to sit down and talk with Nicole, one of the biologists at the Wild Center. This is her preferred method for seed starting. Let's go ahead and take a look at the tape.
My favorite method to do is with paper towels, actually, and plastic bags, little like Ziploc bags. You'll want plain paper towels. Like I prefer to get ones with no dye, no prints on them, just basic paper towels. And then you'll want to saturate the paper towel and use a couple layers, like one or two is usually good. And spray them down with like a little spray bottle. I would use, if you have well water, that's better. Anything's better than tap water with like chlorine and stuff in it. But if you only have tap water, you can let it just sit out for like 48 to 72 hours and that chlorine kind of dissipates out. I do that for some of my plants at home. So you'll wet down the paper towel, and then because it's already wet, the seeds are going to stick to it pretty easily. And you can put the seeds right on top of a piece of paper towel that's nice and wet, and you're going to want to space them out. Because you can actually plant if you wanted to, you don't even have to pull them off paper towel, they'll degrade and you can plant them directly. But you want them spread out, a little grid formation or whatever, and you can label your bag so you know which species is in there. Then you'll take a second paper towel, wet that down and lay it right on top. So it keeps them in the moisture. Slip it in a plastic bag, and then you can leave that on your windowsill to get some warmth, some sunshine.
Yep.
I have radiators as my heat source at home, and I have like stones that I put on top of them for shelving, and they get really warm, so I'll put them on there sometimes. But natural sunlight, finally, now that it's lighter throughout most of the day, will will be helpful as well. And check them every couple of days. That's the way to get them to sprout. You don't need fertilizer or anything on the seeds like that. And you might have to add a little bit of moisture to it. So spray it down or just trickle a little more water in there. But when you zip them into the Ziploc bag, zip it like halfway or so to let a little bit of airflow in there, because you'll see the condensation and everything. And check them to make sure they're not getting too warm. You want to check them frequently because these seeds typically, they'll say like sprout time and harvest time usually on the seed package. But they sprout really quickly. And if they stay in there too long, they can get like seed rot essentially.
Okay.
But you'll see the seeds crack open and there'll be like this little greenish white tiny little taproot coming out. The taproot is the primary root of any plant that all the subsequent roots come off of afterwards. So sometimes they'll be a little stuck in the paper towels. It's actually pretty easy to remove them for the most part. But again, you can use a pair of scissors and just kind of cut right around and leave a little piece of paper towel in there when you plant them if you're worried about damaging the root, because sometimes they'll grow right through the paper towel. But that's my favorite method for starting seeds.
Okay. So thank you to Nicole for taking some time to explain that paper towel method. We'll be getting to that in just a second. But first, we should talk about what we are actually going to start today. What I didn't realize is that different plants and herbs need to be started at different times. So I have my handy dandy garden planner. Shout out to Stephanie Ratcliffe. Thank you for sharing. This is the garden planner that she uses. And this basically has a list of different plants and when they should be planted indoors versus outdoors, depending on where you're located. So today we are going to start with 5 different seeds. We're going to do basil, chives, some salad greens, edible flowers, and kale. Okay, let's start with the paper towel method first. All right, so as Nicole suggested, I've got my undyed paper towels, my water that has been out for 72 hours, and we are going to spread out some of these seeds on the paper towels and see what happens. Just make sure that they're nice and spread out. This over. Gently place this into the Ziploc bag. One more squirt for good measure. Seal it up, but give it a little bit of an opening for air to get in there. Okay, now I'm just going to label it and do the next 4. Okay, now we place the Ziploc bags on my windowsill and keep an eye on them. Okay, so we've done method number 1, the paper towel and the Ziploc bag method. Now I thought it would be valuable to try as many different germination methods as possible. So the other thing that was suggested to me was starting the seeds in soil. So as you see, we've got our small pots and our soil. Let's give that a shot. Okay, so this growing process is slightly more labor intensive, obviously, but I kind of wanted to get my hands dirty in the germination process. So the first thing that we need to make sure is that our soil has the proper components. So I've got this seed starting Jiffy mix that I got from my local home and hardware store. The second important thing that I learned is that when watering the seeds, water from underneath the plant is pretty important. So we're actually going to fill up this casserole dish with a little bit of water and then set the pots in there, which means that our planting pots, it's actually important to have holes in the bottom. So I made sure that the planting pots had some holes. This just helps to make sure that the seeds don't become over-soaked and lead to root rot. So the first thing that we need to do is obviously get these pots full of soil. All right, so our last step is obviously to get the actual seeds in the soil. Now we want to make sure that the seeds aren't planted too deep in the soil, but for larger seeds like the edible flower mix, we're going to try and go about a ½ inch deep into the soil, but the rest of them don't need to be very deep at all. So let's go ahead and get these in the soil. Okay, so we've got everything in soil ready to go. Now we're just going to fill up the bottom of this dish with some water and we're good to go. All right, so that wraps up the first edition of Worst Gardener Ever. I've got my 2 different methods for germinating seeds over near the window. We'll see how it turns out. Be sure to tune in over the next weeks and months as we document this process of becoming a certified green thumb. You know, whether you're an amateur or you've been doing gardening for a lifetime, there's a lot of resources out there. But I did want to highlight a couple from the Wild Supply Company, the Wild Centers Museum store. You know, we've got everything from books to games and gardening trivia and everything in between. Check all of that out at shop.wildcenter.org. And of course, I'm always looking for more tips and tricks. So if you consider yourself a gardener, be sure to reach out to me. You can send in your tips and tricks at wildcenter.org/worstgardenerever. Thanks again for tuning in. Be sure to tune in to the rest of the Wild Center's digital content every single day here and at wildcenter.org/digital. Have a great day.